My name is Mary. I'm 31 years old. I live here in the north of Glasgow with my partner and my wee boy who just turned 3 last week. We rent a lovely fully furnished flat, but we're trying not to get too settled in because we're keeping an eye out for a place of our own. It's been a real struggle finding a place with a mortgage we can afford. I've lived in Glasgow my whole life, went to school here, university, worked here, and I still work here. I loved school. I hated certain subjects and teachers, as I'm sure we all do, but even they couldn't stop me from loving it. I really cherished those memories of innocence, the exciting feeling of an unknown freedom awaiting, full of untapped potential, ready to make an impact, to make the world slow down before it passed me by. After leaving school, I went to university to study business, enterprise and hospitality management. I was driven, focused, made lots of new friends, and I got a lot of experience doing seasonal part-time work. I finished the course with an honours degree, desperate to get out of there and finally be myself. No safety nets, completely independent. I moved from job to job for a couple of years, never settling, never really sure of exactly what I wanted. I'd started to save up during this time. I was waiting for that lightning bolt of an idea for what to do in my life, thinking that the more I compromised, the more money I'd spend trying to forget I'd compromised. No grandiose ideas hit me, but I started to think about setting up a business. Those years of moving from boss to boss, of figuring out how to establish a rapport had worn me out. So I opened a little cafe in the East End of Glasgow. All the excitement of getting things ready and then opening gradually evaporated as I struggled to repay loans, to make ends meet, and finally to compete with the chains and franchises who moved into the area shortly after I opened. I used to light up with pride every time I got the opportunity to say that I was the owner. I'd get that warm fuzzy feeling all over when the service or the food would get compliments. I tried my best to treat my staff as equals, with respect, with kindness, to treat them how I would want to be treated. The community really tried to help when I started to struggle. A lot of them would make a point of coming in, even if it was a bit inconvenient for them, just to check in, buy something to show their support, and gossip a bit about the chains that had moved in. The chains that had wrapped themselves around me, binding my cafe and forcing us to succumb to their will. I met my husband at my cafe. He would come in every single morning and ask for the exact same thing at the exact same time. He's not changed in that way at all. He'd always ask how things were going and we'd make small talk for a few minutes before he headed away to work. Even then he knew how to make me smile. A year after I was forced to close the shop, we get married. As those movies and books always tell us, it's supposed to be a joyful period, stressful and difficult for sure, but full of joy and optimism too. I couldn't find work. Months and months of job searching, soul searching and failed interviews totally demoralised me. Eventually I found some part-time work, nothing exciting, nothing memorable, another chapter in my life that feels lost. How difficult it is to stop a mechanical task, let your brain wander and slowly realise the futility of the whole thing, yet know your only option is to resume or else you're fired. It sometimes feels as though nobody likes a worker who thinks. Shortly after a blissful wedding and romantic honeymoon, I got an interview with a company in the food retail industry. I got offered a full-time job and I took it. 5 years later and I'm still here, working for a chain. My son was born a couple of years after I started. The company handled my maternity leave with consideration, and aside from that general feeling a lot of us have, well, we're treated well, there's some space, financially and emotionally, for us to be treated better. I felt fairly settled there and have had a few status-related job title promotions. My shifts vary over the week. It can be difficult to adjust to the different starting times, but like with almost everything, you eventually just get used to it and hope your body does too. It feels easy to say this now, but getting up at 4:30 to be at work for a 6 start, knowing you're on till 5:30 in the evening can still be very difficult. It's exhausting. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot about our day-to-day operations has changed. I've seen colleagues forced to self-isolate after contracting COVID-19, thankfully none of whom were hospitalised. And I've heard about other colleagues at other stores who have been made redundant because of the economic impact of the pandemic, which doesn't seem to have affected the dividends of the shareholders quite as badly. If they could go without their usual dividend, they'd still survive. If we workers go without our jobs, every day becomes a struggle. Despite the difficulties in coping with all the new restrictions the pandemic has forced upon us, we still operate with the same number of staff. It is mandatory to wear a face mask when you enter the premises, yet I estimate 1 in 5 do not. Some even refuse when we offer them a mask. There are restrictions in place on the number of customers allowed inside at the same time. This restriction is regularly broken despite our frequent attempts to yell from behind the counter to stop people from coming in. We do not have a member of staff designated to coordinate this and to ensure that no customer is allowed in without a face mask. We feel that this puts us at greater risk for COVID-19, yet we cannot stop our work to police these restrictions, as we're understaffed and we have to prepare and make the food, deal with a constant stream of customers, and cope with a high level of demand for deliveries from online orders. Since the latest reopening of society, we've been busier than at any other point in my 5 years of working here. All surfaces that have been touched, effectively the whole store, are now supposed to be wiped down at consistent time intervals, regardless of whether there are customers waiting to be served. In order to do this, we have to neglect social distancing, putting us at risk once again. We do not have a member of staff designated to do this cleaning, so it falls to one of us to do it, leaving the others struggling even more to cope with the additional demands of our work. Interacting with the customers can also be challenging due to the masks. It can be hard to understand what the customer's saying. This prolongs the experience and can make it difficult to get customers in and out quickly and reduce the size of queues. I count myself fortunate to have a supportive partner who also works and earns for our family. He works night shifts though, which brings its own challenges. Neither of us bring home much, but we make it work. We're both so fortunate to have caring, helpful parents who help us ease the strain by looking after our wee boy when our shifts overlap. I just wish that as a society we didn't have to live dependent on being fortunate, scrambling to somehow make things work in mindless entertainment distracting us from thinking. We should be dedicated to the full pursuit of our intellectual and emotional happiness. When I was asked to put this together, I was asked to place an emphasis on my own situation, but it's important to me to mention that there are plenty of people, one is already too many, who are less fortunate than us. Our problems, our temporary living space, the difficulty in getting a mortgage, the issues with my working environment are barely worth mentioning with all of the poverty, homelessness and unemployment in the world. Thanks for letting me say that, and thank you all for listening to me.